Good morning, everybody. Just a 2-minute warning. 2 minutes, we'll get started. So if you have to use the bathroom, feel free to do so.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I know we have some few folks still coming in, but I wanted to do a quick hello, introduce myself. My name is Frank So. I'm the new guy at Emo, and thank you. You know, the interesting thing about being the new guy at Emo is I hear a lot of folks saying, Frank, welcome. Emo's doing such great work. And I think to myself, well, I've only been here 4.5 months, so that's great. But I just want to take a couple moments and just recognize a few folks. First, we've got members from the board of Emo that are here, so I wanted to say thank you to them for being here. Emo does not exist without the leadership of the folks who are here. So thank you to our board members. And most of you have been or are affiliated with a nonprofit, so you understand the importance of having strong leadership. I also want to recognize the leadership that's here in this room. So all the members of the clergy, would you please stand and be recognized? Please stand. Please be recognized. Thank you. Emo is Emo, and it's distinct from other nonprofits because we work in the faith space. And unlike some of the politics, which we're seeing in our state capitol just a couple blocks away, we're here for the values, not for the power. But we're here for the values which empower people, and I think that's a big difference. So I want to say thank you to all of you for being such strong supporters of Emo. I also want to thank the Emo staff. So Emo staff that's in the back and Emo staff that's seated, would you please stand real quickly? Thank you. And then I'll do one last round of applause, and that's for everybody else who's in your room. I would say, I just heard, Frank, this is like a family reunion. Ron was just saying, this is like a family reunion, and it really is. We're a family, distant cousins, I think, Pastor Ron was saying, but we are a family of individuals who care about the same things, and that's why we're here today. So I won't speak too long because I know you've got speakers that are here that are going to tell you more about today, and I know we started a little late, but I'm glad that we're all here. I hope I have a chance to meet all of you, and I tried to stay at the front door to meet most of you. But I want to do another quick 2 shout-outs to, we have Bishop Lori here, who's hosting us in her house, and Pastor Heidi too. Pastor Heidi, where are you? Right there. And, you know, this has been such a great tradition that we've had, and the Lutherans have hosted us in their home for IAD. And it's really important to have certain traditions. And this is one that I am really excited about. I'm really excited that Emo's part of. And having come from Washington, D.C., and being involved in the political sphere, I know how important it is, our advocacy at the Capitol, to make those changes happen. I was speaking with a young person yesterday who said, I don't know if I'm going to come to IAD. I said, why? He said, well, I'm kind of nervous. And I said, why are you nervous? He said, well, you know, they're legislators or senators. And I said to them, had you worked in my world in Washington, D.C., you would realize that most elected officials are more worried about what the populace thinks. But for some reason, we have this notion that some legislatures and government officials are in this high nebulous that really only exists because of us and the votes and the people who care about the issues. So, I wanted to say thanks to all of you. I wanted to say also, talk to people about Emo, talk about the legislation that we're working on. You'll learn more about it today, but I'm really excited. We've had some legislation already pass through to help our work, Second Home on homeless youth. And if you don't know about it, I would encourage you to get to know about it. It's great work. Jenny's back there. She's the director of the program. Say hi, Jenny. There we go. And that's really looking at working towards justice, not just charity. And I think with the situation on homelessness, we need to do more than just say, we're going to hand something out. We need to say, where is the justice? You'll notice we're wearing these shirts. It's our emo shirts that we have. Hopefully most of you will get one today at some point. And by get one, we're not selling them. We're gonna make sure we get as many from a anonymous donor that had it printed for us. So that's great. But Micah 6:8, I encourage you to look at that and maybe have that in your back of your mind today. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. I think these are things that emo tries to do in their daily work. And it's something that I hope you take into mind as you're here today at the Capitol and as you leave today as well. So with all of that being said, another round of applause, please, for Pastor Heidi, who's here. And I want to thank her and everybody for being here. So thank you.
Welcome to St. Mark Lutheran Church. So glad to have you here. I am Pastor Heidi Bolt, the interim pastor here at St. Mark Lutheran Church. This church is leaning into its ecumenical partnerships by hiring me as a Presbyterian to serve this very Lutheran congregation. So we are so glad to have you here. I've been here since September, but in the months I've been here, I've known that this congregation cares deeply about our houseless neighbors, cares deeply about our immigrant and refugee neighbors, is always working on creation care and fighting hunger and seeking justice. So we are so glad to be able to host you today. A few housekeeping notes. I hope you received the information about parking, what is available here downtown. The parking lot that the church has just behind me has a few spots for those with handicap blue placards, and also a few spots for those with limited mobility who might need a little extra assistance getting into the building. Wi-Fi here at the church is slow but available. The password is marker57 with a lowercase m, marker57. And of course, restrooms. Here, as you leave the sanctuary to the left by the lounge where you got your coffee, those are our restrooms. We also have accessible restrooms in our basement. You can get to those as you leave the sanctuary going to the right to our elevator, or if you go to the left, there is a set of stairs. And if that is available to you, you can see some of the Lutheran fine arts, some of our artwork that is in the hallway down there as you go to the restrooms down there. If you need anything about the space, if you have any questions, please reach out to me or Chris Bjork, our maintenance person here. We'd be happy to make sure that you are welcome and feel comfortable in this space today. Again, we are so, so glad to have you. Thank you.
I would like to invite UCC Minister Cecil Prescott for our invocation, and thank him also. He's also one of our board members, so hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. New Guy. Thank you all for coming here today. I invite you to pause, to be aware of those who are gathered here in this space, to remember those who have been here before. Remember this land we stand on. And let us recall that we are called to be witnesses, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. Let us seek guidance that we might continue the work today to create a world with justice and peace. We pray for courage and dedication and integrity as we talk and speak with our legislators today. Grant us wisdom, an ear to listen, careful words to speak, and a compassionate heart in all things. let us be encouraged that we are doing good work. Let us go forth to do that work this day. Amen.
Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce someone who most of you have seen on emails, if not have met, somebody that folks like John Calhoun and others who are on our volunteer committee have worked with and our JVCs have worked with, and that is Britt Conroy. He is EMO's Director for Public Policy. So if you haven't met him, I suggest you meet him at some point today. Feed him all your great ideas. But without Britt, really, most of this effort would not be possible. Britt's in the Capitol day in, day out. He's advocating for a lot of the things that matter to all of us. So pass it on to Britt. Thanks, Britt.
Thanks, Frank. As someone who is constantly asked whether I'm a pastor or not, I'm actually going to go up and use the pulpit. I'm pretty excited about that. So, one second. You can see so far from up here. It's really something. Just welcome everybody. Really appreciate you all spending your day here and lifting up our values, our collective values, and lifting up those who can't join us today. Many people aren't able to join us today, but desperately need advocacy at the Capitol to take place to make sure that they and their loved ones thrive. So I'm really excited to have you all here. And to start us off this morning, we want to talk about how to powerfully convey our story, the why we are here, no matter the issue that brings us here today. So leading this conversation are Reverend Julia Nielsen, Executive Organizer at Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition, Reverend Melissa Reed, the Bishop's Associate for Vital Leadership and Sacramental Organizing at the Oregon Synod of the ELCA, and Reverend Ron Werner Jr., Founding Director of Together Lab. So please welcome them.
It is like a family reunion. It's been like a whole pandemic, and I forgot how to use microphones and be in front of people. But my name is Ron Werner, the director of Together Lab, and it's been an honor to partner with Levin Community Land and Housing Coalition and Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon on a piece of legislation, HB 3482, which I care a lot about because there are people in my life whom I love that are housing insecure. And there are people in my life who are for building affordable housing, but are susceptible to not in my backyard NIMBY narratives. And without community engagement, their fear takes over, preventing us from building affordable housing.
And I'm Reverend Julia Nielsen. I am the director of the Land and Housing Coalition, which is a statewide collective of faith communities building affordable housing on our land and organizing around housing. It's a real pleasure to join all of you and to talk about how our values can influence what happens all through our state, not only for the House bill that Ron just referred to, but for all of the legislation that we're going to be advocating for this morning and this afternoon.
My friend Jake says, we're going to try to, he has this phrase, we're going to try to feed two birds with one scone this morning. We are going to tell you a little bit about HB 3482, and we're also going to talk about storytelling and the power of our stories. And many of you have done advocacy work for years, and this is a moment for us to come back together to tap into that muscle memory of the stories of why we're showing up today on a Wednesday in Salem. A little bit about HB 3482. And I'm curious, let's get our hands raised and moving a little bit. If you are a faith community or are connected to a faith community that has ever thought about building affordable housing on the land that you steward, will you please raise your hand? Go ahead, take a look around the room. That's most of the room. For those of you who have ever thought about building affordable housing on the land that you steward, have you ever run into red tape that created so much inertia you just wanted to give up on the project? Yes. Yeah, a good portion of you. Red tape, so much fun. How about, have you ever run into resistance, not just around affordable housing, but run into resistance from your neighbors because of ministry you were doing alongside folks surviving outside? Yeah. You are not alone. What HB 3482 would make possible is $10 million in grants and $10 million in loans to help with the pre-development costs related to building affordable housing on land owned by nonprofits, tribal communities, rural housing authorities. So often the red tape or a lack of community engagement can shut down a project that would provide housing for so many people on land that is stewarded by faith communities. We know of 48 congregations right now that are ready to sign up for these grants or loan programs should they pass the legislature. We're excited that this bill, 3482, has bipartisan support. It has been championed by Representative Gamba out in Clackamas County, Representative Javadi, who have been co-sponsors and chief sponsors of this bill. The Housing Alliance has endorsed this and made it a priority. And one of the beautiful things as we've been working with affordable housing developers on this legislation, that they tell us faith communities are particularly great partners because we've been around a long time. We don't just say, all right, in 90 days, you got to give us the cost, seal the deal, as someone trying to sell the land to an affordable housing developer might. We have been stable in our communities for a long time. And a bill like this would help us continue to be a stabilizing force in our communities for even longer. I see some of you writing furiously the details of this bill. And yes, details are important, and we'll have one-pagers and all sorts of pathways for you to get the information and the technical details to your senators or representatives today. But that's only one part of advocacy. And I would argue, I'm looking at Britt, he might disagree, that it's actually the least important part of what happens in these meetings. The most important part, in my experience, is these legislators know that we are connected to our communities. That the people who will be directly impacted by legislation like this, and legislation we'll hear about today, we carry in our hearts. They are us. They're in our congregations and they're in our communities. And it's a chance for us to tell those stories about what bills like this would make possible in Oregon and how they can be a part of making that possible in Oregon. Jules, tell us a little bit about storytelling.
Thanks, Ron. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes learning about just the fundamentals of what it means to create stories of the kind that Ron just referred to. And you're going to hear one from Melissa Reed in a moment. And then you are also going to have the opportunity and the time to begin to work out your own. So as you're sitting here, know that we've built space in for you to be able to practice this and get ready for your legislative visits in the afternoon. So story is fundamental, of course, to being human. It's fundamental to advocacy. And Ron explained a little bit of why, but I think it's because advocacy and organizing are about moving people, their hearts, their feet, their money, their decisions. The language of emotion and the language of movement are related. You move someone's heart, you move them into a decision-making space, right? So every single person, I truly believe this, every single one of us, every human person has at least one compelling story, something that not only motivates us personally, but also drives us to bring other people into what is important to us. I know I've often spoken to people, they say, nothing's ever happened to me, I don't have any stories. And then about 5 minutes after I started asking them questions, they're telling me something so powerful that I want to go wherever they take me, right? Every single person has a story. In fact, many of us have many stories to tell because our lives are complicated and diverse. For example, I could tell you a story right now about why I feel strongly about supporting mental health services for veterans, because I have 2 veterans in my family who died of suicide. Or I could tell you about why I organize for affordable housing as a home-owning person. I could also tell you why I advocate for reproductive health care services in Idaho as a resident of Oregon, because I am a woman who needed those services. Any life experience is a possible public story. And we can use them to move someone else, because stories are what we are all made of, and our stories touch the stories of another person. So moving others to act is absolutely about sharing. Okay, how are we going to do this? We're talking about legislation now, right? Okay, how is it going to work? What are the details, strategy, timeline, numbers? Those things matter. This is particularly important to legislators. How many people will this help in my district, right? For how long? At what cost? For sure. But the why does it matter is what really gets to me, to you, and to our future. If we want people to shake up their lives and make new kinds of decisions, challenge their routines, themselves, take risks, it's not enough to tell them that something is right. It's not enough to tell them what to do. We have to explain and get them to feel why it matters to them. Does that make sense? There's a difference, isn't there? Stories are most persuasive when they're carefully prepared. Some of us are really good at telling stories off the cuff, but I know that I am not, and I have to prepare very carefully, especially if we want people to take us seriously, and especially if we want people with power to take us seriously. And if we want that, then we need to take ourselves seriously and prepare for these kinds of conversations. So I'm going to give you a moment between each of the next sections. I'm going to explain how to build a story that will actually move people, that you will be able to use. I'm going to give you a moment to reflect in between each of these portions and to begin to build a map of your own story. So if you have a pen and pencil or your iPad or your phone, something ready that you can start to take notes as your stories get triggered in your mind, that will be helpful. But there are only 3 major parts to an effective storytelling moment. Just 3. It has to have a plot. It has to go somewhere, right? It can be about anything, and I mean anything. I just gave you 3 examples of things. I could come up with 25 more from my own life. Any issue that matters to you. It's just what moves you. What's your deal? What drives you? This helps people not only to understand you, not to test whether they agree with you, yes or no, but to bring compassion into the room. And you want compassion in the room. You want to open with a really powerful statement, and that could just be your name and why you're there, right? You want to be moving, not because you go on and on, not length, but because whatever you're saying is going to give new insight. You want to be specific. It's helpful to be specific. Give it from the heart. People say, I'm afraid I'm going to cry. I'm afraid if I tell my story that I'm going to be embarrassed. That actually is very powerful. Don't be embarrassed by strong emotions or being overwhelmed and overcome by your enthusiasm. It doesn't have to be smooth. It just has to be authentic. And here's the trick. It has to be true. It has to be true. You want to communicate whatever it is you're trying to say in the fewest words, so be concise, because we don't have a lot of time, right? We want to be powerful and we want to be precise. And I want you to have the courage to actually go a little bit deeper. We like to smooth and gloss over things. I think it's actually really important for you to say, this bill, this piece of legislation is important to me specifically because it will have an impact on people I love, and I want to tell you about one of them, right? Something like that. So I want you to just take a moment and think about, we're going to talk about some bills later, of course, more, but you just heard from Ron about House Bill 3482. Just take a moment and think about some of the issues that are going to be ahead of us today, and what are some words, stories that pop into your mind, people, specific names that are related to any of those issues that we're going to be working with legislators on this afternoon. And you'll know you're getting somewhere when you can think of something because it made you afraid, made you worried, it made you sad, it moved you, or it gave you a sense of hope, right? Now, we talked about plot. In a plot, there's always a challenge, right? There's a pivot point, there's a turning moment. And you, the storyteller, in whatever story you're about to tell, you have faced a choice either to look at the problem and decide what you were going to do about it, or to turn away. And for some reason, you decided not to turn away. You felt you had to respond. Some of you responded by coming today and saying, I'm going to talk to some elected officials about this thing that matters to me. So I want you to think for a moment about these questions now, maybe related to the same story that popped into your mind a moment ago. What's the choice here that we've got to make? There's the world as it is, and then there's the world as we want it to be. How do we get from here to here? What do we have to choose instead? What's the tension, maybe, that you feel there? Well, the world could be like this if. The important part is to introduce incongruity between what the hearer, whoever it is, whether it's me or Senator Woods or Representative Nasi, whoever it is, something where that person thinks they know something about the world. And what they now know because of what you said, they cannot any longer deny knowing it. I walked into this conversation thinking this, and now I have information that I have to deal with. What happens here is where you all come in. That's where the story happens. So think about that challenge. Just take a moment. What's the challenge here? Might be as simple as, I don't want to live in a world anymore where children are killed by guns. Right? Full stop. I want my nephew to be able to go to school without being afraid of whether there's going to be a lockdown that day. Right? You can say whatever it is, but there's a challenge there. Now you know that my nephew Keaton is not safe in school because we have guns everywhere. What do you do with that information? Okay, so then there's action, right? Because we're moving people, and we want them to hear something, and we're telling them our stories, and then we need something to happen about it, right? We don't just want it to lay there in the room, like flailing about in the middle. So what? You want to make your choice everyone's choice. What is our challenge? My challenge is this. But now I'm going to make it everybody's problem. Why is it urgent? What is the alternative vision you see? What's the hopeful outcome you want to create together? What do you hope for? You just described the world as it is, now describe the world as you envision it, if we all come alongside you. So I want to let you take a moment with that. Look into the future. What's different? In a sentence. Now I want to invite Pastor Melissa Reed forward to tell you a story as an example. So you have one right in front of you as we move forward today. Thanks. Did you just be here?
I was going to climb up into that big pulpit, but I think I'll hang out with you all. Good morning, representatives. I'm Pastor Melissa Reed, Bishop's Associate for the Oregon Synod, a body of 25,000 Lutherans, 113 ministries stretched across the state of Oregon. And I show up today as a faith leader and as a granddaughter and mother. I carry two men with me into this work for Housing for All. My grandfather, Raymond O'Keefe, a World War II veteran who returned from war a hero and a houseless alcoholic who would have died on the streets if it had not been for the Veterans Administration. I also carry my 14-year-old son, Jack, who struggles with intense anxiety and depression due to the impacts of ADHD and the trauma of these times. He struggles every morning to get out of bed and get to school. He says things like, "Mom, what's the point?" 3 years ago, I accepted a new call, moving from a local congregation to a statewide denominational role during a housing emergency because I experienced the power communities of faith and courageous love can have when we come together from across disparate parts of Oregon to address issues of human dignity. And a global pandemic and racial reckoning later, the housing crisis has only grown, as has a sense of our state's history of marginalizing particular communities. On my drive to my office in Portland, I pass human beloveds sleeping in tents along the sidewalks and under overpasses. And I can't help but think of my son Jack and his future. I see a veteran on the street, and he is my grandfather. These humans living outside are our ancestors, and we need to take care of them. And I know now this tragedy is not confined to Portland. In literally every faith community I visit, from Redmond to Medford, Brookings to Astoria, Portland to Prineville, I ask, what are the pressures on your community, on your families? And without fail, housing is the first issue that people raise. This is both heartbreaking and hopeful news. Heartbreaking because no community goes unspared and families are suffering. Hopeful because these faith communities are attuned to their neighbor's plight. Hopeful because these faith communities all steward land that can help address the affordable housing crisis in their own communities. Hopeful because as faith communities, we are in strategic, trusting relationships with ecumenical siblings and community-based organizations on the ground, attuned to both the needs and strengths of our local communities, the kind of relationships that create wraparound services and make affordable housing successful. Hopeful because we can accompany our neighbors out of NIMBY postures into supportive ally relationships around housing projects, as we are successfully doing in the wealthy Laurelhurst neighborhood in Portland. Hopeful because we have patient and persistent faith. People of faith can wait a long time to see us through the long, intentional process that is building affordable housing. What we need, however, more often than not, are funds to get our projects started. Pre-development costs are the first barrier most faith communities face when they discern a call to respond to the crisis of their neighbors and build affordable housing. And it is a barrier that can feel insurmountable and leave developable land vacant and on the table. We are doing our homework, representatives. We are heightening our awareness as faith communities to the oppression and destruction colonization has had on communities of color in this state, and the role the church has had in that story. A story that results in our ownership of the land. And we are discerning our call to be healers and participate in repair through that land by making sure every Oregonian can come home. HB 3482 helps to clear that initial barrier to building housing on faith-stewarded land. HB 3482 helps to clear the barrier of more stable housing in every neighborhood in this state. Neighborhoods where children attend school, people work, people worship, people make life together. HB 3482 helps clear the barrier to Oregon being a place where all people can thrive. Governor Kotek has made housing her #1 priority to construct 500,000 homes needed to bring Oregon home in the coming years. For us, this is more than a goal. It's a horizon of life to move forward together toward. And we are asking you, our representatives, to vote yes on HB 3482 so that our faith community lawns become living rooms where children come home to do their homework. Our unused parking lots become kitchen tables where home-cooked meals are shared, and our land becomes bedrooms where people can sleep safely at night. If we can envision it, taste it, feel it, we can get there. Oregon's faith communities are ready to answer the call and make this our reality with the passage of HB 482. And we are asking you, our elected officials, to help propel us into that not so distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Melissa. That was testimony that she gave in front of the committee that then voted to move this bill forward into Ways and Means. Thank you, Pastor Melissa. Let's take a moment and do a little bit of reflection on what we heard in that story. So go ahead and raise your hand. What was powerful about that story? Yeah, Marilyn.
The revelation of Pastor Melissa's grandfather having gone through that trial and tribulation, but also knowing that he won't take you to it if he won't take you through it. He will take you through it. So God bless him.
Thank you, Marilyn. Who else? What was powerful? Yeah.
That very multi-sensory image at the very end about the kitchen table and the lawns to living rooms, and it was just so visceral. You could imagine it immediately.
Yes. Yeah.
She did a great job, and she included people of color and marginalized group. I'm an asylum seeker, and there is no federal things to assist me or the refugees because it was blocked by somebody, but that's facilitated. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes.
I think the compelling part of just human dignity, when you hear about the people living on the street, and then also that it's not just in the cities, that it's across the whole state.
Yeah, Chris.
The part about what she was ahead of and the size of the Lutheran organization, to me as a legislator, I would think, oh, she can influence, there's a lot of people that believe this.
Yes, this is not just Melissa here, great orator. She is connected on the ground. Absolutely. Where else, and just shout it out, did we see moments, as Jules mentioned, of choice? Where was the choice that we heard in this story? If you, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, when she said parking lots, how many of you all of a sudden were like, whoa, we got options? There are faith communities in every single community around the state, yes. Where was their challenge in the story? Go ahead, just shout it out. Pre-development costs. Yes. So now the legislator has to deal with knowing pre-development costs are a big barrier to making this happen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And where was the action? Where's the pathway to action? Supporting 3482. Yeah, Pastor Melissa brought it right back to the bill. Here is what passing this can make possible in our communities. Living rooms where lawns used to be. Kitchen tables for kids to do their homework where there were parking lots. Very powerful, thank you. We're gonna take 8 minutes for y'all to craft your own stories now. And it won't be as polished and eloquent, and that was for giving testimony. But what we invite you to do is to think through a story of why you came today. To think about choice that you would offer, challenge, and a pathway to action. So go ahead and take 8 minutes and just, draft it, chicken scratch, think about, root down in the story, your why. And prepare a 2-minute, or could be a 1-minute story. Yes. Yeah. And as you draft your story, it can be about this bill, sure. But if there are other bills that you came today to champion, and we'll hear more about them, feel free to write about that too. I'll let you know when we're at the halfway mark, and then 1 minute on the clock. We are at the halfway mark. About 4 more minutes. Two minutes. Okay, go ahead and start to wrap up your final thought. I'm resisting every urge to do a countdown. I've been watching way too many NBA playoffs. The shot clock's winding down. What is the bill number? I don't remember. Okay. Go ahead and put your pencils down or stop typing for a moment. Part of what is so powerful for me about Interfaith Advocacy Day and taking this time together is we get to stitch together a bigger we from across the state. Different faith communities coming together for a common purpose. And so we are going to take a moment now to practice, because practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes possible. So what I invite you to do is to turn to your neighbor, and here's how this is going to work. You're going to each take turns, and we'll have 2 minutes to share your crappy first draft of a story, right? This isn't polished, this is just practice. Each person will have 2 minutes, and then after the story is shared, the person who was the listener of the story will have 1 minute to offer some feedback about the story. What was particularly powerful, or what did it make them feel, or where did it feel long or a little confusing? And we'll offer some feedback to one another. Now, this only works, it's going to get loud in here. So move around, figure out what you need to figure out. And I will be our timekeeper. So you don't have to worry about any of that. And at each juncture, I'll restate what we're doing in that moment. So you don't have to hold the instructions in your head. Just the story and the listening. Sound okay? We up for an experiment? All right, cool. Go ahead and pair up. I know. Yeah, totally.
I forgot how much I enjoy watching.
Let me just tell them now. Oh. Hold on 1 second. We got. All right, if you haven't started already, your 2 minutes begin now. This is a text message. Okay. First person is done for now. All right. We will now have the person who was the listener offer 1 minute of feedback to the story you just heard. So this is the chance to say, what was powerful about what you just heard? Where were you moved? Or maybe what was long or a little confusing, where they could maybe improve. So 1 minute for feedback before we switch storytellers. And your time starts now. Okay, go ahead and thank your partner for offering that feedback. And prepare to make the switch to the other storyteller. So we are now going to switch to hear your partner's story for another 2 minutes. And those 2 minutes begin now. Okay, I know those 2 minutes go really quickly. It is now time for that person to stop sharing their story. And it is time for your partner to offer 1 minute of feedback. What moved you in the story? What did it make you feel? What was powerful? Where did it feel maybe a little long or confusing? Go ahead, our last 1 minute on the clock starts now. Okay. 5 seconds on the clock. Get the ball to LeBron. Better yet, get the ball to Dame Lillard. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I invite you to come back to the room. Come on back to the room. Invite you to come on back to the space. And imagine those voices, the rumble that we heard in this sanctuary rumbling throughout the rotunda of the Capitol today. Because the stories that we are weaving together in here are going to be told in those corridors of power. Do we feel a deeper sense of yes? Saying yes to bills like HB 3482? Yes? Yes. Do we feel more powerful and rooted and grounded in our stories? Yes. Are we going to talk today about climate? Yes. How about gun violence prevention? Yes. Criminal justice reform? Yes. Hunger? Yes. Tax reform? Yes. Immigration? Yes. That's right, because we're a bigger we and we're a bigger yes in Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Ron. Such powerful stories spoken here by our guests, equally powerful stories in all our hearts, and soon, as Ron said, in the Capitol, when we bring those stories, those challenges to those who hold power in our state. You know, there are 4.5 million Oregonians and just 90 legislators. That is power, and it is power waiting for your stories, for your directions, for your challenges of them. A really quick announcement before we go further. For the constituents of Senator Sarah Gelser Bluen from Albany Corvallis, you have folks here. Take a look at your, maybe I'll steal someone's sheets with your legislative assignments on it to show what I'm free to refer to. Thank you, Reverend. So pull out this and you'll look in the second box under legislator, and if Senator Gelser Bluen is your senator, we are kicking you out because you have a meeting at 11. Everybody else has meetings in the afternoon, but you're going to go with my colleague Kim Wagner, our public policy associate, who's going to train you as you walk in the sunshine all the way to the Capitol, and to talk, and then you'll come back and we'll have lunch for you. So. Kim, can you raise your hand there? Kim will do it. Yeah, great. All right. Before we take a break, we're gonna touch on one bill and then take a break. You know, in these presentations this morning, we're learning about key policies, about crucial investments. Underlying all of this, though, is an understanding that our state's budget, at the end of the day, is a moral document. It proclaims our priorities, it proclaims our values. And to help us understand our state's budget and tax system and discuss the need to tackle a particularly wasteful tax subsidy that is undermining Oregon's ability to house our unhoused neighbors, I would like to introduce Alejandro Queral, Executive Director at Oregon Center for Public Policy. Alejandro.
Thanks, Britt. Can we put up the slides here? Wonderful, thank you. Well, she does that. First of all, I want to thank you all for being here. You know, the work that you're going to do today is critically important to advancing justice in our state. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've been in your seat many times before. I've been in Brett's seat many times before, and I know what a huge lift this is. I also have a tall order. I got to tell you in 15 minutes or less an overview about our tax system, how the general fund works, our state budget, which, as Brett correctly points out, it is a moral document. It's a statement of our values. It's like we're putting our money where our values are. And so we got to think about it that way. But another way that I want to offer you to think about taxes and revenue is really, as Britt pointed out, it's the thing that underlies all the stuff that we're asking for, right? I mean, if we're going to reform how we do and create affordable housing in Oregon, we got to pay for it. If we're going to do, better legal services for immigrants, somebody's got to pay for it. We can pay for it. We have the resources in Oregon. We are a state in the richest country in the world, in the history of the world. So don't tell me we can't afford it. It's a choice. It's a choice that we can make. And so today I'm going to give you a quick overview of where we are. I'm going to skip through a lot of slides here because this is a longer presentation. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the tax system. And of course, I don't have to tell you that our taxes and our revenue pays for a lot of good stuff, from traffic lights to healthcare services to education and so forth. But the reality is that our revenue system continues to fall short. One of the things that you will probably experience today as you are asking for support to for some of the bills that you're going to be working on is how we're going to pay for it. The pie is too small. Well, folks, we have ways of making the pie bigger. But let me give you a sense of what makes for a good tax system, because it's not just about making the pie bigger, it's about making it bigger the right way. And to do that, we have to anchor it in a set of values that have really informed Oregon Center for Public Policy's prescriptions for policy reform on the revenue side of the equation. Incidentally, for those of you who don't know, Oregon Center for Public Policy is a progressive think tank that works to advance economic justice for all Oregonians through research and communications. And so you should check us out if you have a chance, ocpp.org. We've published many research papers on a variety of issue areas, certainly including taxes. So check us out. We also have a number of papers and an analysis of SB 976, which I will get to in a minute, which is the mortgage interest deduction reform bill that we'll talk about and you'll be hopefully advocating on. But back to the value. So the first value that we gotta center our thinking about revenue is progressivity. And I just skipped one, so I'm not gonna go back. But progressivity, this is one that you're probably familiar with. It's fundamental to tax fairness. Is the idea that the taxes that people pay need to be proportional to what they make, right? So the question that we want to ask is, are the poor paying proportionately more in taxes, in which case that tax is regressive? And on the other hand, if we're asking the rich to pay proportionally more on taxes, we can say that that bill is progressive. As simple as that, not a foreign concept. The second one is one of adequacy. Is the revenue that we're raising sufficient to pay for the services that Oregonians need, including education, including healthcare, including immigration reform, and so many other things that are on the list. But we have to have enough resources to make that happen. And of course, we have to anchor the distribution, the allocation of those resources through an equity lens. How do we use those resources? How do we raise those revenues in a way that either advances equity or doesn't create or exacerbate disparities? And what I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes is that the current system that we do have, while one would say is the tax system is mildly progressive, when you look at the whole, not just the taxes that we pay, but all the deductions, all the stuff that we kind of, the passes that we give to rich people in some ways are actually, when you take the entire thing, it's actually a fairly regressive system. So let's just review real quick. How do we raise revenue? For those of you at the back, I'll try to describe some things. I know this is small, but essentially these lines show the various top taxes that make up most of Oregon's revenue, and the personal income tax constitutes the vast majority, around $24 billion per biennium. This is for 21, 23. These are updated figures. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to get hung up too much on the exact figures because there's fluctuation depending on how the economy is doing. But the personal income tax is the vast majority of it. And property taxes is the second highest, that's $16 billion. Property taxes, as you know, are the local taxes that local jurisdictions raise to pay for services like fire and police and education and so forth, right? So there's been some limitations. We could get into it, and if there were questions later, I can talk to folks about measures 5 and 50 and the impact that had on property taxes. But nonetheless, $16 billion is still a lot of money that helps provide for those services. There's a whole host of other excise taxes, unemployment insurance tax, which is different from others in the sense that it's allocated to a specific fund to support the state's unemployment insurance system. And then the other thing that I want to point out here is that corporate income taxes until recently didn't even make the top 5. And that changed, of course, with implementation of the corporate activities tax, which is raising close to $2 billion to fund our education system in the state. All right, so our state budget, the general fund is around $29 billion. The majority of that, for about 43%, goes to pay for education. I don't know why my slide is so messed up, but the other one is health and human services at about 30%, and public safety. So that's where our money goes to. 16% is others, a whole host of things in there. But our source of state budget dollars, again, personal income tax is about 83% of this pie. Corporate income taxes, lottery, and then finally the state tax make up almost the remainder. Interesting. There's been some variation. So, because the personal income tax is the vast majority of our source of revenue, I just wanted to quickly review how it works, because marginal tax rates are not like an intuitive thing that we can understand, but basic gist of it is here that the lowest tax rate is 4.75%. So everybody making under $7,499 or under $7,500 would pay a 4.75% up onto that. And so on, right? So the next category, anyone paying between $7,500 and $18,900, 6.75. The key point that I want to bring you to, and let's see if this works. I have a little, there we go, look at that. So the key point here is that this is where the progressivity of our income brackets really is eliminated, because what you see here is that at 8.75% marginal tax rate, anyone making, and by the way, these are joint tax filers, so if you're like trying to work out the math and you're just, these are joint tax filers, so a single tax filer would be about half of these figures. But essentially, a couple filing jointly making $19,000 would pay the same rate as what Phil Knight pays, or someone making up to $250,000, up to $250,000. So they're paying exactly the same rate. So in that sense, it's a mildly regressive system. But on balance, when you take everything together, not just what we pay from our personal income taxes, but all the deductions that we take, all the tax credits, where are we? Where do we land? Well, we've looked at that. And the reality is that there are many, including the mortgage interest deduction, many loopholes, tax cuts, deductions that actually make our system more aggressive. So I want to focus on the mortgage interest deduction because I'm running short on time, but also because there's an important bill that you all will hopefully be lobbying for, which is SB 976. All right, let me look at some of the details here because this is important. First of all, I want to show you why this is such a critical piece of legislation to work on. The mortgage interest deduction in the states, as it currently works right now, not only can you deduct on your principal residence, but you can deduct on a vacation home, for example. And at the end of the day, what happens is that the majority of the dollars from that mortgage interest deduction flows to the top 20% of income earners. About 59% of those dollars flows. And this is true not just in Oregon, but throughout the country. In fact, the U.S. Treasury Department conducted a study looking at mortgage interest deduction distributions. And just to look at the exact numbers, because it is important to highlight how this particular deduction actually helps drive inequities along racial and ethnic lines, and it helps drive inequities between rural and urban localities or counties. So, for example, white families, this is nationwide statistics, but just to give you an idea, white families make up about 67% of the national tax filers, right? But capture 84% of the mortgage interest deduction. Whereas Latino families, which make up, 15% of tax filers but get 7% of the benefits. And black families are about 11% of tax filers but get only 4% of those benefits, right? So this adds up to $26 billion flowing to white families and about $5 billion left for everyone else. So that's clearly neither progressive nor equitable. So how do we start to fix this? Well, at the state level, SB 976 gives us an opportunity to do this. First of all, it will scale back the mortgage interest deduction to the state for all filing types, starting at $200,000 in adjusted gross income, right? So there's a cap now where we start reducing it, and at $250,000, you can't claim that mortgage interest deduction. Moreover, we will eliminate the ability to claim a mortgage interest deduction on that second home, the home that is not a primary residence. So you will be able to claim that mortgage interest deduction for your primary residence only, which seems fair because ultimately, I mean, let's go back to the history. How was the mortgage interest deduction? Why was it put in place? The intent was to promote home ownership. But the way that it's structured is not leading to that. In fact, I would say that it's not promoting home ownership, it's taking opportunities away from home ownership. So how do we distribute, how do we allocate those dollars in a way that actually gets us to that goal? So SB 976 accomplishes that, and it also results in the trimming of about $200 million off the top of more than $900 million that is the cost of the mortgage interest deduction currently. So when legislators today tell you that we can't afford this or that, the other thing for like, what was the bill that we were just discussing? The HB 3482. Loans so that folks can move through the red tape to pay and create affordable housing. One of the things that I can assure you we'll hear today is, we can't afford that. Well, guess what? We can. SB 976 will get us there, right? So you have your task cut out for you. I'd love to talk to you more about revenue things, but my time is short. I will leave you with that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. OCPP.org, we have a lot more information both on SB 976, but all the stuff that I talked about today, we've analyzed, we've digested, and hopefully we're providing you with the resources and materials you need to get the work accomplished. So thank you all for your work today, and good luck.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you. You know, when you all registered for this event, the vast majority of you selected housing. Is that I have that same ringtone. As housing as the issue that you're most passionate about, and certainly as the issue that legislators are caring about. So we wanted to start the day with two housing bills, but we'll come to other important issues soon. But let's take a break first. So we'll take a break. You'll find in the lounge, you'll find coffee and tea, or maybe it's all gone. Still some there? We'll take a short break and then come back and hear just about a few other bills before we go and get lunch. I will say that today, again, like Frank mentioned, we had a donor step forward. We have these T-shirts that are for some people. Only for those who are willing to wear them in the Capitol. One of the goals that we have today is, how do we show power, right? How do we show that there are people of faith that want these type of bills passed? And so please grab a shirt, put it on, wear it as we walk to the Capitol, wear it around the Capitol, and it will create a buzz. People will come to you like, I've seen 5 of those shirts already. Why are you here? What bills are you working on? I guarantee you somebody will ask you, and that's an opportunity. You're trying to create a buzz. What's happened over the years past is, for a week or two afterwards, people will come up to me and say like, wow, Interfaith Advocacy Day, you guys brought a ton of people. I saw shirts everywhere. So that's what we're trying to create. So please grab one, and please keep it. And then I will pass to my colleague Christy as well.
We are short on supply on the Black Do Justice t-shirts. We will be ordering more, and we will have them for sale on our website in the next, it'll probably be about 2 months. However, we have alternately Love First t-shirts out here, so just come and let us know what your size is, and we will do our best to get you something.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, hey.
One of the things you might want people to know is to take anything metal out of your packs. It will not go through the metal detector.
That's true. Yes, let's. When it's time to go to the Capitol, it's true that we now are in a world where we have, for the first time, metal detector in the Oregon State Capitol. So we'll talk about how to make sure that process goes smoothly, including getting things out of your pocket. So, but for now, we're going to keep the break pretty short because we're running a little bit behind. So at 11 o'clock, please rejoin us here. Give us about 10 minutes to kind of stretch your legs a little bit and come back. Thank you very much.
I'm done.
Right.
See, that's kind of how
Right. Well,
it's actually a mix of people that they're not one.
Okay, and then
No, yeah.
Yeah, we just did a table. He's doing these tabletop things in the evenings.
Yeah.
He actually said,
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, we all need to. And it's, I know people. You pick and you choose. And just like all these bills, there's all these bills. I could be here from mom's demand action. We do. And
Let's get started with our next group of speakers. Come on in. I know. Let's start. Yeah. All right, everybody, please take a seat, and we'll hear about a few more bills before we get some lunch. So. Danny with Just Catholics, what's your name? Yeah. Pleasure. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I'll give you a last-minute email. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being here. Yeah. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, glad you're here.
Yeah, Matt was really the one that started that. Living life, Yeah, but those contacts were there, so I was in, and I always was thinking about I need more.
Okay, cool. I think you might be second after. Let's see. Yeah. I know, seriously. It's a confined space, maybe then. All right. Thanks, everybody, for hanging with us here. After months of planning have produced really not just a lineup of really important bill topics, but I think a determination by all the organizations that are part of this event to move forward together on this, on a really a legislative agenda that will improve the lives of people of this state. And next, to speak about Senate Bill 520, a bill to create a better system of compassionate medical release for those who are incarcerated, I'd like to welcome Kyle Hedquist, Policy and Outreach Associate at the Oregon Justice Resource Center, OJRC. Kyle.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. It is exciting to see so many great people coming together to advocate down at the Capitol. I want to start by saying that a priest, a Lutheran, and a Buddhist walked into prison. No, this is not a joke. This was my life. 28 years ago, I was sentenced to life in prison. Sorry. And last year, I was released by Governor Brown. Yeah. An answer to a lot of prayers from a lot of good people. But I'm not here to necessarily talk about my story. I am fortunate enough to be employed with OJRC, and they said, Kyle, with 28 years of life experience inside, we want you to go down to the Capitol and work with legislators and, do what you do. I spent many years inside advocating for fellow prisoners inside, and part of that was through the hospice program. I was a part of that program for 23 years, sat with hundreds of individuals who had been diagnosed terminally ill, many from the lifestyle that they had led, drug addiction, violence, houselessness, all these issues that are being talked about today and at the Capitol through legislation you see in prison. The difference is in prison, it's right in your face. Sometimes it's easy to drive by a homeless encampment or to see someone who is obviously having a rough day. But in prison, you can't escape that. So it's in your face every day. So I do appreciate the effort from this group and others to make changes that are compassionate. I understood fully the arm of justice with the state of Oregon, but it was people of faith that bring mercy, that bring compassion, that bring love to that arm of justice. SB 520 actually is a bill that could save taxpayer dollars. You won't see a lot of that. However, this is one. Very simply put, Oregon has a compassionate release mechanism. The problem is it takes about 6 to 9 months to complete. When people are diagnosed terminally ill with less than a year left in their life, 6 to 9 months is not long. And only about 7% of applicants ever see any relief. A matter of fact, in the last 8 years, only 7 people were able to complete that process, while about 300 people passed away. So who are these people that we're talking about? Most of these people were veterans. You know, it's an aging population, and so you see a high number of veterans, you see a high number of fathers and grandfathers who, yes, committed a crime, came to prison. As one legislator told me just yesterday, well, if they're sentenced to 10 years, then the law says they have to serve 10 years. My answer was, well, they're going to die in 3 months. So 10-year sentence is not applicable at this point. SB 520 brings that compassionate arm that I believe, especially in this room, is a value to Oregonians. That prison is not designed to be a house of death. Prison is not designed to be a nursing home or a long-term care facility. And that these men and women have loving families, have children, are veterans, have other forms of support outside of a prison setting. And I can tell you personally, prison is not a nice place to pass away. However, surprisingly, there are a lot of really nice guys taking care of the dying. And so on that point, the hospice program transformed my life and many, many lives of my fellow prisoners. But I think we would all agree that while we're there to provide as much care and compassion as we possibly can, it eliminates the family. As you may know or not know, it is not easy to get into a prison, one, just to visit someone. It's even more difficult to bring children into the physical facility itself. There are many rules governing that, preventing children and minors from even entering the prison. The infirmary is inside the prison. It's not inside the visiting room, making it virtually impossible for children, grandchildren, and loved ones to visit their loved ones that are incarcerated. So I urge you to think about it, read about it. You can go on OLIS. It's in Ways and Means. Just to give you a rough number and finish up, Oregon taxpayers, everyone in this room, including myself now, pay about $50 million a year to the Department of Corrections for health care. They always go over $50 million that they ask taxpayers to pay. By letting out 3 to 5 people a year, you can save about $3 million. And so it's really easy to see how this bill saves millions. Now, what does that million can be used for? Improving health care for the rest of the people that are incarcerated, or improving behavioral health. You know, that money's not going to leave DOC, it's just going to be used better. And you don't see a lot of bills that talk about better efficiency of tax dollars and ultimately saving money. And so SB 520 is a great bill that does all those things, and I appreciate your guys' support, and I appreciate seeing everyone here, and I love the shirt. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much, Kyle. Some of you may feel like you've seen Kyle before. That's because he was on the front page of the Oregonian just this last weekend in a feature article about his work here at the Capitol, along with a colleague of his doing something similar. Really appreciate all that you're doing, really powerful stuff. You know, for people of faith, compassion drives our support for SB 520 and so many of the issues that we care about. And as Reverend Nielsen said at the top of the morning, our hearts yearn for an Oregon with fewer gun deaths, and with kids sitting in their classrooms focused on learning, not on a potential lockdown a few minutes away, possibly. So joining us today to speak about gun violence prevention are the leaders of ballot measure 114, who will discuss Senate Bill 348 that will implement the ballot measure. So please welcome Liz McCanna, Marilyn Keller, and the Reverend Mark Knutson.
Thank you, Brett, for all the outstanding work, and thank you for the previous presentation a moment ago. Right before the pandemic, about 100 of us spent time with the Lifers group in the penitentiary after going through 8 doors, and every single one of them was part of the hospice team. Powerful stories, thank you. We're going to model a mini Lift Every Voice Oregon press conference. Rather than me speak for 10 minutes, we're all going to take 3. I'm just going to do a minute opening. So, whenever we do a press conference, we want to model as people of faith on a very important issue that we are together. Native American spiritual leaders, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Christian, other people of faith, and people of just goodwill. We always want to model, whenever we do a press conference, the diversity of who God created us to be. That's ethnicity, human sexuality, gender, all of that, to show that we are about this together. The second thing we always do at a press conference is we thank the press, because our Bishop Lori knows that the press are storytellers, and many of our members are members of the press, and we need to ask them to tell these stories. So we had more earned media than any campaign in years in Oregon, because the press enjoyed coming to the press conferences. They heard a lot. The third thing is one of the most important. If you just stand as you're able for a moment, please. I see the Reverend Lynn Smouse Lopez. I see Cecil Prasad, many who worked on this campaign. This is the most important reason. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are made in the image of God. And then say to somebody else, aren't you beautiful? Oh, okay, we're losing it now. Okay, you can sit back down. I'm going to pass the microphone. But those are key components. We don't want to see anybody suffer from gun violence, and especially our children and youth. So Marilyn Keller, Chief Petitioner, is going to lead us off. Liz McCanna, Chair of our legislative team, is going to go next. I'll do a little close. Rabbi Kahana wished he could be here. Reverend Dr. Haynes, others, they all send their regards, but let us go for about 10 minutes on this.
My job as the third Chief Petitioner and also as a member of the core team of LEVO, Lift Every Voice Oregon, is as the artistic arm. And we recruited many, many artists and artisans during this campaign. But again, I'd like to ask you to stand because this is an anthem. We named our organization after the James Weldon Johnson anthem. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing a rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Thank you. Now, I just worked with my senator, Senator Lou Frederick from District 3 in Portland, to come back here on Monday the 29th to open the legislative session. So I'll probably be singing that song, if not another. But this campaign that we ran in 2023, from 2018 through 2023, focused on the hearts and minds and souls of the volunteers, of the people of Oregon, and how strong we are together, and how we have walked through the blood of the slaughtered. And we've come now to this bright moment where we did get ballot measure 114 passed, and we're now facing the Senate Bill 348, now -A, to enact this ballot measure. And we are going to be calling on all of the resources that we called upon in 2022 to get this campaign up and running. We were, of course, faced with some opposition to the ballot measure, to getting the signatures that we needed. We needed to gather at least 112,000 signatures to get this ballot measure on the ballot. And we were facing some high odds and obstacles. Even our allies were a little bit detrimental to us getting this done. But 3 events happened. Uvalde, Buffalo, and Highland Park. And after those events, people came out of the woodwork. We ended up with over 5,000 volunteers gathering signatures across Oregon in every single county and every portion of the state. We gathered 161,000 plus signatures, and we came right here to the Capitol on July 8th and delivered the final batch of signatures to it. It took a lot of praying, it took a lot of work, it took true grit, and we got it done. And we need you to speak on this issue today as you go through the Capitol. 348A must pass. It is the enactment of ballot measure 114, which was voted into being by the people of Oregon.
So I get to talk about the nuts and bolts of what's going on, and I really, when we say we did it, you all did it. I know there are many people here gathered signatures, helped, and we thank everybody. We thank ourselves because we're all in this together. So now we need to get Measure 114. It is law, but it needs some things, some details, something to help implement it, and that's really what Bill 348, and it's A now. I think there will be a B, but 348 must pass. Basically, it's got a long road. It's got to go through the Ways and Means Subcommittee, the full Ways and Means Committee, the Senate, and then the House. But we are told, and we are committed. We talk to everybody we can. We've been down here this week and next week, and we're going to talk to everybody today. Senate Bill 348 must pass. And let me tell you a couple things that it does. There's a long list, and there's a sheet, a handout, and it talks about more things, and it does even more than is covered by the sheet, but something necessary. And I sort of say these are the provisions. This one is for the FBI. And the FBI has said, we won't do the background checks unless you have some legislative act that says these magic words. And we said, hello, a ballot measure becomes law. It is now the law of Oregon, but they still want some magic words that the legislature will pass, and that's in 348. The next one is for everybody. This is it's an addition. Measure 114 said it would be enacted in an equitable and consistent manner, particularly the permitting system. The state police have to do a report, an annual report. We wanted to get in even more specifics, and it's in 348 that they have to, for every county, they have to do the gender and racial statistics for the permits granted, the permits denied, the reasons for denial, and if there are counties or particular sheriffs in any event who are not being equitable and fair, that'll show us, that information will show us, and that's in the bill. There's another one I call the encouragement provision. As you know, there's been some litigation involved with 114, and really to challenge it. One court in a county way out east said it stayed until he gets to rule and has a trial. we're confident that is going to, we're going to move through that. If, regardless of that result, we are confident the Oregon Supreme Court is going to say this is constitutional, because it is, and it's so important. But during this time, we don't want anybody, including the counties and the local police, to do nothing, and they aren't. The state police and the counties have been moving forward. I just heard a sheriff someplace said, we've already hired our permit agent, and they're going to be able, they can issue permits. We want them to keep building. And this law says there's nothing in this law or at any time that should keep you from moving forward. So it's an encouragement provision for them, and that's important. And the last thing, there are a group of expediting, I call them expediting provisions. If there is a challenge to 348, yeah, there will be a challenge because but it provides some interesting provisions. They're perfectly legal. It says all of those lawsuits need to be filed in Marion County, and that's not just because we know some judges in Marion County. I mean, they're good judges. There are more judges. There's only one county or judge out in the county, Harney County, I guess I'll name it, that is ruling and has stayed the provision. But Marion County is the logical place. They deal with a lot of statewide initiatives. They're great, so it makes sense to have it there. There's also in this a direct appeal to the Supreme Court. So that's going to allow efficient resolution of any concerns. And there's an emergency clause. Means it goes in effect immediately upon acting. This is an emergency. It's really important. We want you to go to talk to all of the legislators, even if you're doing some other bill, if you can happen to mention, and make sure you push 348 through as quickly as possible. They should act as if there are lives at stake, because there are. Thank you.
So 348, we want to pass fully with no watering down of Measure 114, which the Oregonians passed. And you can look county by county, and even the counties that voted against, there's still 40,000 people voted for. So it's across the state. So let me close, so Britt, we can stay on time. 25th remembrance. Well, before I say this, all those on the steering committee that are here, rise up, please, please. I see others here that, Lynn, Reverend Smouse Lopez, peace, just rise up from, okay. Thank you. I mean, many, many people have worked on this and met every week for the last 5 years. Many young people in high schools who could not be here today, but worked on it. And so we wanted to lift up our young people because they were at the core of this. So when the governor signs the bill, we're not going to be up alongside the governor. We want teenagers surrounding that governor, our governor, at that moment. So let me close with this. 25 years since Thurston, and back after Thurston High School on May 21st, we said, how long? After Uvalde and Buffalo, we said, how long? After Parkland, we said, how long, oh Lord, must this go on? After Allen, Texas this past week, how long will we sit silent in this nation and allow this awful scourge of gun violence to continue? The only nation on the earth where the #1 cause of death for children and youth is gun violence in this country. How long, we cry out. But we say also, how long? And we hear God say, not long. Because 5,000 volunteers around this state got 114 on the ballot. How long? God says not long. Because people of faith are saying this is a core issue to us. When our neighbors are bleeding and dying, we cannot be silent. How long? We say, God says not long. Because 5-year-olds and 95-year-olds got signatures, and they said this is how democracy looks. We heard our teenagers chant. They learned that democracy can be lived by people of goodwill, people of faith and just goodwill, to make a difference for the sake of the common good. How long? We say, God says not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. How long? We say not long, because truth crushed to earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because 200 of us are going to the legislature right now. And we're going to say, let's get 348 done, but before you adjourn, let's ban assault weapons in this state too, and help lead the nation, because I am convinced that Washington was able to act because Oregon voters were the only voters in the country that voted for the most comprehensive gun legislation back in November. I'm convinced that our legislature has House Bill 2005, encourage that as well, would not have been in the legislature had not people risen up and voted to give courage to people across this nation, say no more, how longs, but we can say not long. We're on the cusp of changing what this nation is. No retirement, no minimum age. Everybody keep at it, and God bless each of you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. That's what leadership looks like. It's 11:30. We're getting closer to food. In the Catholic tradition, as in the case of many of our traditions, we see fasting as a way to focus on the needs of others. And as we all experience hunger in this moment, let's think about those who endure hunger daily. So as we approach lunch, let's turn to SB 610. Food for all Oregonians. To share about this crucial bill, please welcome Allison, who's the Executive Director at Levin and formerly the Co-Executive Director at Partners for Hunger-Free Oregon. Allison Keeling, please.
Hey, folks. Hi, good morning. So y'all are gonna have to hang with me a little bit because I'm stepping in for my friend, Matt Newell Ching, who is stranded in New York. His flight was canceled last night. I got a 9:30 text saying, Allison, are you gonna be at Interfaith Advocacy Day? Can you speak on the bill? So here I am, and I can not speak to the detailed policy wonkishness, but I can speak to why this bill matters to me. So I have been pastor at Salt and Light Lutheran now for about 3.5 months. I'm new still. Prior to that, I was at Partners for Hunger-Free Oregon for 8 years, and I started in community engagement there. And when I started there, before we did community organizing, we did community engagement. And so the strategy that we used was focus groups. And where we started with this was, okay, I'm gonna travel all around the world, Oregon. Sometimes it feels like traveling around the world. And ask folks, what do you need to improve access to food? And sometimes we got really wonkish. We were like, let's talk about SNAP, let's talk about food stamps, what about, farmers market match? What about, we got like really in the weeds. And actually what we learned in that first tour around the state, talking with folks, was that they didn't have access to SNAP. They were completely excluded. Entire communities of Oregonians doing essential workers, as we learned during the pandemic, and folks who are just alongside us, right, in our communities, and who are us. And I saw and began to understand that, this is not new. We divide ourselves up into categories to describe ourselves, right? We use categories like documented, undocumented, citizen, immigrant, refugee, and somehow, using these categories, we make decisions about who is worthy and not worthy of support, of access to food. This made me think about my family and my partner, whose parents immigrated here in the 1970s and who at times struggled to put food on the table for their kids. And I wondered about when they were struggling, did they have access to SNAP? I don't think so. And so then I think about my child, who's 4 years old, bicultural, biracial child, and I think about the world that he will inherit. I want him to live in a world where we don't divide ourselves up into arbitrary categories, where we decide who is worthy and who is not of access to food or any other number of things. You already know them all. I don't have to say them for you. So that's what this bill begins to do, SB 610. It's one step along the way where it creates a state-funded program to eliminate those exclusions, where every Oregonian has access to SNAP. So now I'll get into the wonky parts that I can speak to a little bit. Not into the details the way Matt would have been able to bring, but you've got a handout, Food for All Oregonians. And what it does is it creates a state-funded program that eliminates exclusions to SNAP. And it builds on successful community-driven navigator models. We've used this with our health navigators across the state, so building on that to provide folks with guidance in applying for SNAP, and also makes applying for assistance more welcoming and culturally responsive, offers more languages, that sort of thing. So that's my story about why I support this bill, and I hope that you all will also speak to it with your legislators. Thanks.
So powerful. We tried to recruit faith leaders that had some experience public speaking. It's really, really impressive. And just the values that Allison has brought for years to this work is a hugely, hugely important bill. And this, like so many bills, are important not just for Oregon, but for people across this country. When Oregon passes legislation that shows that we care about each other states find the courage to do the same. So on so many of these bills, this work is really, really important beyond our borders. So one final bill before we head downstairs for lunch. House Bill 2957, really related to what Allison was speaking about. That while we as people of faith refuse to divide people into groups, our laws do. And that as long as that's the case, we need to work as hard as possible to ensure that in our immigrant and refugee communities, that all those who are eligible for services and support once they obtain status do indeed have access to services that can help them attain that status. We know that in Oregon and across the country, 1 out of every 3 individuals who lack status actually is eligible for an immigration status, but for a lack of resources or lack of knowledge about their eligibility, doesn't seek that out or can't obtain it. House Bill 2957 seeks to change that. And to speak about this bill, please welcome Veronica Nunez, Director of Leadership and Advocacy at Adelante Mujeres, and Nacia Castañeda, our dear colleague, community organizer at EMO.
Hola, buenas tardes, good afternoon, or morning still, right? I'm already thinking ahead of myself. I'm Nacia Castañeda with the Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, and my colleague Veronica and I are going to talk to you about the importance of HB 2957, which provides to those eligible Oregonians to stabilize their immigration status and start down up towards a pathway to residency, permanent residency. So this would allow all those immigrants that have maybe an eligibility that they're not even aware of, like Britt said, to apply for that process with USCIS with the help of an attorney, because we want to make sure that these people get the help they need from the correct person, right? We don't want them to go to notarios who a lot of times have go through fraud. You know, they lose their documents or end up paying more. So the importance of HB 2957 would allow many people with the possibility that have advanced parole to be able to apply for residency. Many of them are eligible or have been a victim of a crime. That would also make them eligible to obtain a permanent status. There are many different ways that this could happen. So having a consultation by an immigration attorney or a creditor representative would allow this to be done for these people to obtain a legal status. I'm kind of nervous, and I just want to share briefly a story from one of our clients. You know, working at SOAR Immigration Legal Services, every day I saw people coming in, many of them wanting to ask for a consultation but couldn't afford it. I don't know if you know, but at SOAR Legal Immigration Services, the consultation is $50. So imagine for somebody that doesn't have those $50, how hard, how stressful it is for them to not know if they're eligible for something because they don't have those $50. So this bill would provide that funding for that person to get the consultation and have thorough information of their eligibility. So, you know, challenges that these people are facing is that they don't have the work authorization to be able to work and provide or earn that money that they need to provide to cover the attorney fees and the USCIS fees, which are very expensive. To apply for a family petition, it can be, you know, in the private sector, thousands and thousands of dollars. So many people are trying to, you know, have earned the money that they need to provide the expensive housing that we already know about, provide for their family, and so it is very difficult. I'll pass it on to Veronica, and she'll share a little bit more too.
Hello, everyone. Buenos días. My name is Veronica Núñez. I am the Director of Leadership and Advocacy at Adelante Mujeres, a nonprofit that is based in Forest Grove, Oregon. I came to Oregon in the year 2000. I came from Venezuela. That's where my family is from. And what I came to share is why this bill 2957 is so important for me, and how I have seen that when resources are well used and when people have the right mentorship and the right access to legal services, they can thrive here. And by that, they thrive and their families thrive, our communities thrive. I have three special stories. One is my friend Carlos, who immigrated almost 14 years to the state. He's eligible to apply to the citizenship, but hasn't been able to save enough money. He hasn't seen his mom for 14 years since he left Venezuela, and part of the reason is because he has to send them, he's an only child who sends money to his family every month. So one of the struggles of immigrants, especially I know from Venezuela, is that sometimes when we come, we have to still send money to our families, and that's a barrier sometimes to save thousands and thousands of dollars that sometimes these processes can cost. I also have my friend Bibi, who is from Argentina, now a U.S. citizen. She was in a case of domestic violence, and she thought that she couldn't leave her husband because of, you know, like many reasons, like fear. Her husband would tell her that she couldn't leave or she would be deported. She actually found support through Catholic charities, and that was her path to citizenship. She didn't know there was one person that held her hand and actually brought her to the right services, and now she and her kids are citizens of this country and living their dream of actually being able, you know, to buy a home, to afford education, and so many other things. And then there is my friend, good friend Mario, who also didn't know the connections that he needed to have, the resources, and just last summer talked to me like after I met Nasia, and Nasia told me about SOAR and the resources, and he was eligible but didn't have the money. He was saving. And he 2 weeks ago, he presented his citizenship exam and is on his way to be a citizen of the United States. So I do believe that by having the resources, so many people can benefit. And I want people to see also that when one person thrives, when one person is doing well, that has an impact in our communities. We cannot feel detached from the stories that happen, because when people are in trouble, that has an impact, but when people are doing well, it also has an impact in the way we can invest these resources back into the communities, instead of maybe giving it to false people that are advertising something, or instead of putting money in this process, they can put it into the places, into the education, into the economy, into community. So I do believe that this bill can help us all to have a better life here in the States.
That's yes on HB 57, 2957.
Thank you. Thank you. Is Kim here? No. All right, so I'll share the news about, we've got a couple of meeting changes. This happens every year. So pull out your meeting sheet. Representative Sosa, who's actually a great leader on House Bill 2957 we just heard about, from Hillsborough, along with his colleague Representative Ruiz from Gresham. So Representative Sosa, you'll notice that you have a meeting at 12:30. So eat fast. We'll head downstairs, but just so you know, you'll want to get food and head over to try to get to that. We do have food you can grab and take too, so you're welcome to grab your lunch and sit at the Capitol and eat right before or right after your meeting. So for those with Representative Sosa. And you want to give us an update on Taylor? Yeah. Good news, bad news?
Hi. So for those of you who are meeting with Senator Taylor, that meeting has just been changed. It's now from 1 to 1:15. 1 to 1:15. Okay. And then one more change. For those of you who are meeting with Representative Mannix, that meeting is now from 2:15 to 2:30. 2:15 to 2:30. Well, yes, same locations. Same locations. And then the meeting with Senator Steiner, that meeting is being moved virtually. We're still working on location for that, but I'll keep you updated. I'll let you know. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Kim. All right, well, so with that, let's head to the food. So that's going to be out the back, down the steps. Good-looking people in good-looking shirts will direct you. And then we'll have one final presentation over lunch on climate. So be ready for that. Thanks all.